Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the evening in our knowledge session. We'll wait for 2 minutes for others to join in. People are joining in, and we'll just give a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. And thank you for again joining us. I think we're good to get started. We have audience in the room. So once again, thank you guys for joining us in the evening webinars, knowledge sessions from the Digital Fifth. And this topic, been joined with Deepak Sai, and we'll be covering talking about DPDPA, Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is around the corner, right, for the implementation. So we'll be touching upon it, and we'll continue gonna have multiple sessions on the touching on the different aspects of the DPDPA and coming couple of weeks. So let's get started, and please allow me to just share my screen. Okay, Deepak, how it's visible, right?
It's visible on full screen. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So guys, today's sessions primarily will touch upon the different aspects of the DPDPA, like what are the critical principles behind the DPDPA, how do you build, what is the blueprint that you need to build for DPDPA, what are the challenges, and then also that what the implementation roadmap, right? But before that, a quick introduction from our side. Myself, Shashank Shekhar. I've worked with L&D Infotech, Wipro, and quite a good time with the DCB Bank, handling multiple technology functions from the governance to digital banking and infra. And then I joined the Digital Fifth. Maybe quick introduction from Deepak.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Deepak. I've been a part of Digital 15 for almost 5 years now. And we've been working on several of these digital initiatives and been a part of the ecosystem and looking forward for this informative session today.
Yeah. So, and quick, not more than a 1 minute introduction from the Digital Fifth. Many of you may be knowing about us. So we are into pure play digital consulting firm, purely operating in the BFSI segment. We also conduct Bharat Fintech Summit, which is again content-based event. We're primarily targeting throughout the BFSI segment. Sami is a CEO and the founder, and we have the other senior members, Shrikant, Vikrant, and me and Deepak are already there. I'll just skip. This is just a customer base that we have worked. Largely, we work with the banks, NBFCs, the fintech, as well as the embedded finance players. Just quick one differentiator, we primarily follow an implementation practitioner approach for our consulting services. So that's where that we are strong on the focus on the thought leadership that we continue to push through the various reports and the newsletters. Many of you may be getting our newsletters. We focus purely on the consulting services in the digital space, where that be it on the digital advisory, open banking advisory, technology advisory, or risk and compliance advisory. That's where that we operate into that. Partnership, where that be on the go-to-market strategy, that's we help, and we do lots of the training, be it on the digital banking, digital lending, technologies, risk and compliance, DPDPA. We have been doing DPDPA full day sessions with a couple of entities for their technology and product teams. Within the risk and compliance, I'll just skip. We perform various ITIS audit, ISO 27000 certification programs, cybersecurity management, risk management, third-party audits. Those are all the things. We do lots of work on the compliance assurance, be it on any master direction from RBI, either ITI governance and risk and compliance assurance, or you talk about outsourcing of technology services, digital lending guideline. We do that, and DPDPA also we work with the customer to primarily our banking customers to help them into that getting ready for DPDPA compliance. So that's all. Now we'll just head to our sessions where that primarily we'll focus on the key terms and components of the DPDPA, what are the critical elements within the DPDPA. We'll look at the compliance challenge, why it's going to be not easy for the DPDPA integration. I'm not trying to scare, but trying to bring out some of the elements which will explain that why it's gonna not gonna be an easy pathway, right? But what are the blueprint for the compliance? Definitely, it's not like you can't do that. Definitely, you have to do that, and you can do that. So blueprint for the compliance, and what are the key immediate steps that will do that? So DPDPA, if you look at it, which was already passed as an act in 2023, which primarily focus on to ensuring that personal data of that individual citizens who are there in the country being getting services from any other entity that is protected, right? So that's a good part. Then this year, the 2025, the draft rules for the implementation was released for the public feedback, and public feedback has been collated. And it is expected maybe the mid 2025 or later that we get that final rules for the implementation, and that it will also set the direction for the implementation and compliance readiness for the entities across country for the get ready for the DPDPA compliance, right? It primarily focus on the collection of the data that any entities operating in India, be it on the bank, fintech, social media, e-commerce, telecom, whoever is there, storing the data, processing of data, personal data, that's where that entire the focus is there, right? It's focused on that primarily individual rights, that as an individual, what the data I'm giving, what kind of the controls that I have on that data. That's where the entire the DPDPA focuses upon, right? And it also gives to maintain that. It also provides lots of guidance that how you're going to handle those data practices, right? Be it on the consent part of it, be it on the notices, and some of these elements that will touch upon it. It's tried to align with some of the global well-known standard or the guidelines or the act that you talk about or the regulations. One of the GDPR is a quite popular one, or the California compliance privacy. These are some of those very popular ones. It's very much well aligned with that global benchmark in the terms of the regulations. While it comes to the banking, I think banking is going to handle lots of our personal information, be it on our KYC related information, you talk about it, or our behavioral information collected through the apps with respect to what kind of the apps that we use, how do we use our mobiles, that kind of the various behavioral analysis, as well as the entire the transaction analysis that we do on the transaction on the banking platforms. So that's why that it handles lots of the sensitive financial information. So that's why the compliance for the banks, financial institution, NBFCs, and all the supporting ecosystem from the tech service provider or the fintech, it becomes very critical, right? One of the fundamental, I think we'll go into deeper into the each aspect, but one of the critical is that entire data management with respect to the banks collecting the data need to be completely aligned with the consent. Today also you may be saying the consent when you are entering your Aadhaar number or the PAN on the any applications used by the of the banks, you will see that there is a consent, but that consent, is it completely aligned with the act? It's very difficult to say at this moment, right? So that's where the entire focus is on the consent part of it. And it's also pushed the banks or and any entity, but we'll continue to use the terminology the banks, NBFCs, because our focus is on the financial institution to mitigate that all the risks that with the data compromise can face, right? If you try to look at that, who are the critical elements? The data principle is that all the individuals to whom that banks, NBFCs, or the financial institution interact, right? That's qualified as a data principle. Those who are availing the services, all the data is related to that individuals. Now, many other times you will have the questions that banks also interact with, like say, current account customers, which could be private limited, or it could be the sole proprietor or partnership firm. Yes, those entities may not be falling into the data principle, but the people who are associated with the entities, like your directors, your founders, or those who are the operators from the companies, their data that has been collected, those will be qualified as a data principle. So you need to be very careful when you are designing your entire the DPDPA compliance that you touch upon those aspects. Those all individuals do that. And very simple, that data belongs to that individuals, right? Be it on your KYC information, be it on the transaction info, or any sort of the information being managed by this entity. The data fiduciary, I think this is the entity which maintains that collects your data, or that's primarily maintains your data, right? Very critical. One way to differentiate. Okay, so before the data fiduciary, I'll talk about the data processor. Data processors are entities in the banking for community or banking ecosystem, if you look at those who work with the data fiduciaries like bank to help into the processing of those data for providing the various financial services, be it on the lending, be it on the payments. But how do you differentiate between data fiduciary and data processor? Many times you'll come across the bank and fintech relationship. Taking a simple example, right? Now, one easy way to understand as per the act is that the entity who is defining the purpose of the data which is getting collected, right? So in this, most of the cases, you will figure it out is the bank who decides the purpose. Maybe the fintech is collecting the data, but the loans is being provided by the bank. So bank is deciding the purpose, which is the loan to the customers, right? So that's where you'll differentiate. So I hope you understand the data principle, data fiduciary and data processors, right? Bank's data could be at their cloud or with their on-premises data. That's primarily that entire protection has to be done. The data processor, if you look at it from the bank's partner or the NBFC's relationship, it could be the fintechs who is working as a business partnership to acquire the customer and service the banking services to the customers. So fintech. But at the same time, you will have the many of those technology service provider like ATM switch provider, various SaaS platforms, account aggregator, TSPs. Those all will start falling into the data processor because ultimately they work with the banks and help to process so sort of these informations, right? Few fundamentals, I think, primarily touches upon all the aspects that any issues related to the data which is getting collected, how the data is getting stored, how the data is getting utilized. So entire data life cycle, if the data that has been collected from the customer at the start, that's where that entire the DPDPA angle touch upon. It applies to the entity who are operating in India as well as the outside who are providing the services to the customers. The data principles in India. So company may be outside, but they're catering to the services to all the individuals in the country. Very simple, as per the word that comes as digital, is any the data which is getting collected in the digital forms will come into that purview of the DPDPA. But not only that, but any data which has been collected in the manual forms, in the physical application form, but later it is entered into the systems, or if it is scanned and then stored in the storage of the servers and all these things, that all will qualify under the digital data protection bill. So other than that, any documentation information which is available completely in the physical form may be excluded, but whatever that get converted in digital, all will fall into that DPDPA purview. A few more terminology. I think data that we could understand that any information, be it on the Aadhaar, PAN, that I already spoken about, transaction data, that anything which can be related to that individuals will come into that data definition. I think consent manager is very critical component due to understand from the DPDPA perspective, because its entire the DPDPA framework is aligned to the consent, right? When the data is getting collected, there is a proper consent. What it also introduces that the entry of a third-party entity called a consent manager, which works with the data fiduciary to collect the data of the individuals based on the consent. So it's primarily more like a facilitator for the consent management. So that's where we will be there. As per the guidelines, what it says that when the data protection board gets constituted, which is again one of the mandate from the DPDPA is there, that the government will constitute data protection board to govern that entire aspect of the DPDPA compliance, ensure about the data breaches, inquiries, the complaints management. So data protection board will be constituted. So once the data protection board will be constituted, the entity can go and apply. They have given the guidelines for the constitutional consent manager, and based on that qualification criteria and the guidelines and the scrutiny, they may appoint that entity operating as a consent manager in the country. Another important terms is a significant data fiduciary, which is primarily any entity which manages the humongous set of the data, which is critical from the individual's perspective, that will be falling as a significant data fiduciary. And it is expected that banks, being in a very critical to the process and they manage huge amount of the data for the large set of the customer, they may qualify as a significant data fiduciary. And being a significant data fiduciary, there are additional that activity that they may need to perform, like the data protection officer. They need to appoint the DPO, which is primarily be responsible for the DPDPA compliance within that entity. And also that is not mentioned here, data protection impact assessment, where that it primarily the significant data fiduciary has to perform that risk related to the data which is being collected, right? What are the impacts could be there in case of any breaches happen? And personal data, which is again is probably that any data which gets stolen or misused from the entity that will fall into the data breach. A few of the principles, I'll not go into detail, but subsequent session which will come and be tuned to our LinkedIn page where that you can get notification. Few of the critical foundation principles that it's focused on the lawful and purpose limited processing. Like any data that is getting collected has to link to that only that one particular purpose. It can't be the mix of the purpose. It's very clearly to the purpose, and purpose has to be very clearly defined. Let's say, for example, application of the loan or opening of the saving accounts or creating an UPI handle. That's kind of the thing. Clear purpose has to be defined, right? And then consent-centric data processing. So whatever the data is getting collected for the purpose has to be very clearly defined through the consent, right? So that's where the consent has to be very clearly documented and mapped to the purpose. The third element is very critical, which is again, it's focus on the data minimizations. So for that purpose, to scatter to that purpose, whatever the data that you may require, you don't need to only collect that particular data information. Let's say, for example, for opening in a saving account, if the material information is not required, then you are not supposed to collect that data, right? Unless until you're able to establish that that particular information is required for my product for that particular purpose, right? So you need to be very clear that what data is getting collected. Another example, I'll give you that when you go to installation on an app, if on the mobile, you'll try to see that access to the multiple features of the phones, be it on the storage, photos, cameras, and all these things, or the location. And you need to be clear that is that every information is required to serve the customers through their mobile app. So that's where the data minimization becomes very critical. Notice and transparency, that as soon as the consent is getting captured, the customer receives the notifications either through the in-app notification or on the screen or through the SMS that he has given that consent for that particular purpose. And you need to have cover the multiple components within the notices, including purpose, what kind of the data has been collected for what purpose. So those all information has to be captured. Some of the other operational papers, which is like again, like purpose limitation, I already spoken about. Storage and retention limitation, it puts emphasis that how long the data can be stored, how can be retained. Other than that, whatever that guidelines is available from the regulatory purpose or from the government law purpose, that data has to be retained. Other than that, as soon as the purpose gets fulfilled, you may need to delete the data. Okay. Accuracy and completeness, very much emphasis that all the data principal information is well maintained. It's very accurately across all the systems. So if it comes for the customer comes to the bank for the any data updation, you need to be very focused that data gets updated across all the platforms. So it also provides rights to individuals, that right to withdraw or erase. It can come and that say that, okay, I want to withdraw my purpose. Again, it will link to the services that he's availing from the particular banks or the NBFCs. But at the same time, he can also request for erasure of the data, but it needs to link to the retention part of it. You can't delete that every data, but unless until it is required from the law. Like, say, for example, saving account and transaction has to be maintained for 10 years as per the RBI guidelines, then you need to maintain that. Even the customer request, it can't be fulfilled, right? Then establishing the accountability, auditabilities, then security safeguard, lots of the emphasis have been put into the security, be it on the encryption, be it on the auditing, logging, access, right access. That's where the emphasis has been put in place. I think I'll just quickly run through that. I think all coming from the digital banking experience, we know that why this is critical from the data protection from the today's perspective, right? Very fundamental. Most of the journeys are now is end-to-end mobile. All the data collection is happening on the digital forms. All the information from the customers as well as from this any information from the bureaus, account aggregate, everything is getting collected digitally, right? 100% paperless onboarding process. AI-based granular behavior analysis is getting done. Like you're collecting lots of the other information other than what he is providing or entering the data. We see that a lot of the digital lending platforms, open banking APIs, be it on the pulling the bureau information, pulling the account aggregator informations, rise of super apps, again, it's everything is a digital. So that's where that we have completely see a shift in the native banking ecosystem, which primarily pushes for the lots and lots more data uses, right? Collections as well as the uses. So within we look at the financial, every aspect, be it on the Aadhaar or be it on the mobile UPI, all the transaction, it's only pushes for the data collections, right? And we have seen the digitization for the KYC informations, banking information, everything is available on the online. While at the other side, RBI continue to provide lots of the guidelines which continue to emphasize on the security of this customer data, security of the customer rights protections like digital lending guidelines, IT governance, risk and controls, where that primarily emphasize on that putting in the right data governance, backups, and all this infrastructure security. Outsourcing, so bank is RBI is emphasizing that in case if you're going with a third party, which again a data processor in this case, right, in DPDPA, it's already provides lots of emphasis on the controls part of it. And pure the operational risk management. And we, I don't want to get into that some of this incident which keeps on happening on that industry. We keep on hearing about it, either whether the RBI putting any penalties or some kind of the data breach we have seen. Just a few pointers. Why is it required in a DPDP and banking? As we have seen that digital is completely transforming the banking happens, right, in the country. So one, definitely it enhances the customer confidence and the trust into the ecosystems, because now they are very well assured that, okay, what are the data has been collected is only for that purpose. There is not going to be misuse. They know that the data is secured with that entity, whatever information has been he's sharing with that banks or NBFCs or the insurance companies or anybody. It's also put a lots of emphasis that it helps that to strengthen that entire the cyber security postures, right? Be it on the any hacking kind of the incident or any kind of the data breach, because it's the DPDPA put lots of emphasis on the putting that right technology controls to ensure that data protections across the entire the data life cycle. Not only the data which is stored, but also at the time of the processing, at the time of the data moving from the data processor to the data fiduciary or between any of the parties. So lots of the security posture advancement. Since now it's putting in a right framework for the data protections, right, and data privacy management, it will definitely see a different level of the data innovations, accelerations, right, because you have lots of the clarity the way you can use the data, right. You may not be able to misuse the data, but you can use the data, but you'll have to use in the right framework as is suggested by the DPDPA guidelines, right. Definitely, it helps you to align with the regulatory requirements, risk mitigation part of is there, as well as that it emphasizes loss on the data uses and the protections, because it provides you the guidelines, right? Now let's look at spend some time under what are the compliance challenges. That we'll go into the different aspects maybe in the next subsequent sessions when we'll have. But at least now you will have got some sense of that. What is the data DPDPA? What is that? What are the different elements that gets covered, be it on the purpose, consent management, data minimizations, notices, and all those aspects, right? But it's not going to be easy, right? You will have lots of the compliance challenges when you start your journey on the DPDPA compliance. Let's just start with a few of the things. Like you may have that legacy system. And when I say legacy system, it doesn't mean that old legacy system, but you will have the system which has been implemented within the banks or NBFC or insurance companies, AMC, anywhere. It's a quite long time, right? It may be running for 8 years, 10 years. So modifying any kind of the flow within that system may not be as easy as you will expect that. There will be loss of the lack of integration among the systems. Now you may have the API calls, but many other places you may see that there is not a straight through integration. And where there are not straight through integration, the data get exchanged through the files, right? And when the data moves through the external files outside the system purview, then the risk increases on that, right? Then limited ability to discover, classify, and track. This is another challenge, that where that all the data, personal data, like suppose PAN number of Shashank Shekhar, which all the system is storing that PAN number. It's very difficult to identify, right? So that will be difficult. And then classifying that, okay, this set of the data falling into the personal informations, and then you can establish that, okay, now here the data is storing, I need to put that stringent security control, right? Not having any unified framework for purpose data uses, like, so for example, it's very difficult to establish that, okay, saving account has been opened and these are the data has been collected, like PAN, Aadhaar, his address details and everything. But this details has been collected is actually for the saving account opening or for the loan provisions. That's going to be a really tough time, right? The similar again on the consent life cycle gaps, right? It's very difficult to establish that, okay, it may be typically you will find that very generic that, okay, I agree to the terms and conditions that bank may use my data for different purpose, right? So that's where that many of the things ambiguity may come. So you need to bring that kind of the clarity. And many times that you may have the very unified consent for various data that you're getting collected throughout the period of your customer journeys, right? No version control, typical challenges for finding the consent for the previous any data that which has been collected. Even that, let's say, for example, OTP based consent is there, tick mark based consent is there, where that you are storing in the database that can establish that this consent was provided to the customer. Most of the things maybe is available in the system logs, right? Audit logs of the systems, which is very difficult to decipher, right? So that's where the typical challenge is gonna there, that you need to find out that all the data which has been collected, there is a proper consent available, which can be established through the system records, right? I think another challenge that lack of the data mapping or the record of processing activities, like how this data get processed, where the different set of the data is available. You may not have the clear data lifecycle flow itself, right? So that's the typical challenge. Then breach readiness, how you are planning. This is one of the major challenges going to be there, right? As per the guidelines, it says that in case if any data breach happens, you need to notify to each individuals who has been compromised as a part of the data breach. And you have to send the notices to each individual by telling that what data has been compromised for that individuals. And it's going to be a massive exercise. First itself, finding out that which all customers the data has been compromised, and then reaching out to those customers with a clear messaging that what are the data has been compromised, like PAN or Aadhaar, I'm just speaking, or credit card number or this is a debit card number, that you need to communicate and what impact can it happen, so that at least precaution that data principal can take. So this is a typical another major challenge going to be there, that having a mechanism to address that breach readiness, while at the same time having a right BCP-DR kind of the planning in place. A few more challenges. I think this is again, as the digital banking ecosystem continue to evolve in the country, where that loss of the fintech partnership, which is a necessity as a part of the business, evolving digital banking in the country, it's a part of our life, right? And lots of the ecosystems development is happening, be it on the ONDC, if you look at it, or OCAN, or you talk about it, account aggregators. So these are the different entities are there where the banks now collaborate and work together, right? And then many of the data providers like TSP, if you look at the case, earlier days where the TSP or the solution provider is given the application, it has been stored in the on-premises data center of the customer or the bank. So at least you are not bothered about that's bank responsibility to take care of the data protection. But now the data is stored and the SaaS providers, that this is cloud. So it's primarily acting as a data processor. So that's where that you will have a loss of the dependencies, then classifying that what the data process role is of the data processor is there. Having the responsibility of the banks, making sure that all the contractual clauses and all these things are being there covered. So typically, you need to go back to look at all the contract and see that all the necessary requirement which is there as per the DPDP expectations in terms of the data protection, breach readiness, in terms of the consent part of the purpose part of it, everything is well documented as a part of the bank fintech partnership and the contracts, right? Another is this is again very critical, data subject rights, because it put lots of emphasis on the data subject right, which is primarily a data principal rights, right? So he can come and ask for what kind of the data that you are storing for me. You should be able to provide the provisions that you can furnish those information to the customers, right? Nominee, there is a right to nominee for the data. So primarily it says that data principal can come and tell the bank that in case something happens to me, my data can be given to this individual, or he can come and manage my data, right? So those are the typical challenges gonna be there, and you need to have the kind of the interface where that you and maybe logging the grievances, raising the complaints with respect to data misuse and all sort of things, right? So you need to provide an either on the website or some kind of mechanism where that data principal can come and exercise his rights. So that's another bigger challenge gonna be there. Encryption and data minimization discipline. So data minimization, definitely I've spoken about that, gonna be a major challenge where the banks need to go and find out that where that each of the journeys, each of the product, that what are the data is getting collected, relook at it. So every product manager has to go back and look at it. So that's why one of the critical component of the implementation, if you look at it, that it's not a one technology, it's team responsibility, but it's every teams gets into the participation for the implementations. And having an all kind of encryption, as I was talking about, that many of the places you may have definitely have a very stringent encryption, but many of the places you may not have, or maybe having on the storage level, but not in the motion data which is moving in, transacting in between systems as well as between the entities, or during the processing. So during the processing also you need to ensure that data has been protected. And building that entire the culture aspect and the compliance ownership within the organization. So these are some of the typical challenges that you foresee when you start on the implementation roadmap. But before I just continue, I think we've gone on a monologue. I'll take in a couple of minutes of the pause and see if there are any questions. Very happy to pick up any questions are there. Any question, anybody, either you can put it in the Q&A sections, or you can raise your hand and we can enable the mic to ask the question. If not, maybe we come to the end of the sessions and then we talk about and we can pick up few of the questions. But for the next part of the session where that Deepak will talk, Siddesh Srivastava is asking that is this only for BFSI? Definitely not, Siddesh. As Struggle is an act, right? It has been passed by Parliament. It applies to any entities operating in any segment within the country, including your social media platforms, including your telecoms, including all the banks, insurance, BFSI, manufacturing, wherever that any entity dealing with an individual's data fall into that DPDPA purview. Rather expected timelines for the act coming into force and being in force. Very difficult to comment, Mukund. Though it was earlier expected that when the draft rules was released and the feedback was collated on the time, it was expected on mid 2025, but we can't say. And also considering the current situations, it's very difficult to comment at this stage. But expected that this year definitely it will come. Yes, it may also come back with a detailed guidelines for the implementation. It is expected that it may come with some timelines that for the getting ready for the compliance, right? Maybe 6 months, 3 months, 1 year. I don't have an answer to that, but we'll have to wait. Just one, Deepak, go ahead. Guys, we have shared the feedback form in the chat. Please share your feedback as the session continue to happen. Always your feedbacks helps us to continue to improve. Thank you, and Deepak, over to you.
Thank you, Shashank. Thank you everyone for joining today. And before we move on to the further session, let us maybe take a moment to understand some of the misconceptions that most of the people are currently having in terms of the DPDPA. So largely, the expectation or one of the misconceptions that people have is DPDPA applies to only digital first companies. Currently, all the entities handling personal data, including legacy organizations, wherever we have collected the records physically and further digitized, are also considered a part of DPDPA. And another misconception that we have is consent once taken is valid forever. That is how most of our digital journeys have been till date in terms of the journey. But as per DPDPA, consent must be specifically linked to a particular purpose and has a certain time validity bound to it until the purpose is fulfilled. So while ensuring, we need to completely reimagine the journeys as we've been discussing and understand what is the purpose of this particular consent, and we need to keep validating. Are we still able to meet the purpose that the customer gave the consent for? Is something that we have to continuously keep doing. And banks are another misconception is banks are never considered as data processors, but every particular financial institution or every be it any BFSI organization for that matter is considered as a data processor, because there are a lot of third-party products involved, be it your TSPs, be it your fintech organizations. Internally, there are several tools which are continuously processing this particular data for us to enable several services to the customers, right? So all the financial institutions are considered to be data processors. And another misconception that we have is mostly only IT teams and digital teams need to worry about DPDPA. Not really. Every cross-functional team has to come into place, be it your product, be it your business teams, be it your legal teams, operations, risk, technologies. Everyone have to work together, because the data keeps moving in the organization from one particular department to the other department, trying to fulfill the purpose of the particular customer, or maybe ensure we are providing the services that we have promised to the customer, right? So every particular department needs to come onto the deck and understand where the requirements of DPDPA are and how further they can contribute to fulfill the compliance requirements. So moving on to the core pillars that can help prepare for the blueprint or for the DPDPA compliances. One thing we should be starting with the governance and accountability piece, where we need to establish the data governance officer, also have a data governance council in place, along with the respective data privacy policy that is coming into the enforcement into the organization. We're defining the particular scope, be it your particular digital products or any other products, trying to identify what are the products that we should be considering, what are the departments that have to be involved, who are the people that have to be involved, be it your data owners, be it your data processors. So every this particular activity in terms of governance and accountability, assigning the accountability in the organization for DPDPA comes first, where most of the organizations are currently working on. And then the data intelligence piece, trying to go back, as we've earlier discussed, see if at all our data dictionaries are currently mapped, the classification of the data has been put into the personally identifiable information, specially identifiable information, or any particular data which can help identify the customer directly. So these are something that we have to ensure the classification is taken care of across all the particular tools that are currently being utilized. And the record of processing activities is something most of the organizations don't maintain, but here we need to start maintaining this record of processing activities, understand which are the data points that are constantly fed into several systems and constantly being processed across. So we need to constantly keep monitoring, ensure it is not just in terms of your API pulls or anything, it also has to be in terms of your logs that are getting captured, be it your databases, be it your particular applications. Everywhere we need to keep monitoring on the data storage that is happening for the about the customer, and running a very comprehensive data privacy impact assessment across the organization is going to be the key. We'll speak about the impact assessment activity in the further slides. The other thing most of the organizations are currently focusing on is the product intelligence aspect, trying to redefine the product policies, trying to identify what are the data points which are mandatory for the customer to be onboarded, what are being additionally taken to maybe just improve the particular services, or maybe enrich the data onto the platform, know the customer more in terms of the customization activities. How do we minimize this particular data points, as we've been discussing in terms of the challenges? This is going to be crucial. While the data is considered to be the black gold, and how we are going to serve the customer entirely depends on this particular data, trying to minimize the requirements of the data to meet the DPDPA compliance is going to be crucial. Achieving this particular balance in terms of having the customer fully identified and having the data enriched versus meeting the compliance aspect are going to be the crucial aspects. And then the customer rights management across the particular consent that we've been consent lifecycle that we've been discussing about, not only receiving the access but also ensuring the customer consent is being as easy as we are collecting this particular access or consent from the particular customer. It should be the same way easy for the customer to identify, update the consent, or maybe practically revoke the particular consent, or ensure the consent or the data is also deleted if the customer requests for it. So this is going to be crucial, and enforceability of having the customer rights management across the institution, and monitoring the customer requirements as and when we are receiving in terms of the consent are going to be crucial. And then speaking of the next aspect, it is the processors and vendors oversight, be it your fintechs or be it your data processors or be it your technology platforms, which are actually integrated and helping run the entire financial institutions, are going to be monitored specifically, trying to understand across each and every part of the journey, each and every part of the API that is being consumed, what is the impact in terms of the data that is being shared across, what are the activities that are further being processed on daily basis, how are we maintaining this particular data, and does this particular data, whatever is being fed into the third party systems or your technology systems, have a particular life cycle defined in terms of deleting the data after a specific point of time, ensuring we revoke the particular information being considered from a particular customer after a specific point of time. So these are going to be crucial. And in terms of the technical controls across the particular systems, encrypting at column level or maybe at the masking at the particular application level wherever the data is being specifically shared across, having a specific data privacy unit sitting in wherever the data needs to be practically unmasked and verified, rather than having the access to every technological every technical person who's available in the organization. So having those particular role based access, attribute based masking and attribute based access is going to be crucial, along with the tokenization between particular applications where the data is already shared, having ensured that particular, not just the session along with the API is being tokenized along with the data that is being shared across, and having the data breach alerts being scheduled across all the systems is going to be crucial. And as we've been discussing across all these parts, monitoring and audit is going to be one other critical aspect for most of the institutions, where not just the internal checks are going to be crucial, which could be a resultant of your data privacy impact assessment aspect, but also ensuring the daily reporting or monthly reporting in terms of the requirements of DPDPA or the fulfillment that has been taken care across, be it your encryption requirements, privacy requirements that are constantly monitored and reported to the organizations are going to be crucial. And for DPDPA implementation is not going to be as easy as we've been discussing about. Rather than ensuring it is coming from top down, it has to be a bottom up approach where every particular employee understands and is well trained in terms of understanding what are the data points that they are dealing with on daily basis, what are expected to be visible to them, what are expected to be collected from the customer to service them rightly, and ensuring that the incident playbooks are well available, where the employee knows if in case let's say there is a data incident that has occurred or any unmasked data that is available which shouldn't be there, what is the immediate course of action that the employee has to take. So it needs to be a bottom up approach, and ensuring that nomination flow, that is ensuring each and every department has a data steward who's actually helping each of the particular department have the data privacy controls in place, is going to be crucial. And moving to the further slides in terms of implementation in financial institution, as we've been discussing, data mapping and classification is going to be a massive and key activity that most of the institutions should start undertaking if they have not already started. Ensuring that each and every product we are understanding what are the data points that are required, what are the customer journeys, how do we redesign this particular customer journeys to ensure minimal data is consumed but maximum impact is taken care of to ensure we serve the customer properly. So those are the requirements that most of the organizations should start initiating in terms of data mapping and classification. The security and privacy aspects, as we've been speaking of the encryption, masking, access controls, be it not just the role-based but attribute-based access at every data point level, monitoring the access across each and every data point are going to be crucial. And ensuring the implementation of automated tools for breach detection and breach notification, be it in your logs, your SIM systems and your SOAR systems are going to be further modified to ensure the data requirements are also taken care of in terms of the logs, wherever are the crucial data points which are there. Let's say tomorrow we are reducing certain API from moving across 7 different parameters being taken across to 5 different 5 parameters only to be considered, but the backend is still providing all the information across 7 parameters. So identifying that as soon as possible and restricting that particular tools to have minimum data access is going to be crucial. And the technology upgrades to ensure that the consent information is being validated across each and every data pool before actually just not just ensuring the system gets the data, but also validates this particular consent before processing each and every data point that is available across the systems are going to be the key. And ensuring that the tracking of these consents and validation across the requirements of your products and systems, be it across your verticals or maybe any cross-functional team or any cross-selling team which is available, so is going to be the key where they validate it across. And upgrading the systems to comply with the requirements of these particular consent requirements or technology upgrades is going to be the key. And as we've been speaking of the consents, it is important to backtrace the current consent which is available, and basis the modified journey as per the minimized data requirement. We need to ensure all the historical data in the organization also to be modified across to meet the compliance requirements, and mapping these consents to specific data processing activities, be it for your loan processing or pre-approved product customizations, or any kind of data or UI customizations that most of the organizations are currently ensuring to fulfill the customization or the personal hyper personalization requirements for the customers are going to be crucial. And in terms of the governance and compliance aspects, where every department and every team is going to be responsible for the data that is being consumed, the consent which is being validated across before utilizing this particular data. Having the DPO appointed along with the data governance council is going to be the most crucial aspect, and the immediate course of action most of the organizations should be taking care. And implementing real-time tracking of this particular compliance and the consent adherence is going to be crucial, where the data governance council should be focusing upon. So moving to the immediate steps of the course of action or the DPDPA implementation, as we've been discussing, the immediate action most of the organization should be focusing on is the data discovery and the profiling aspect. Identify each and every journey of the product and each and every aspect, be it any across any channels, be it omni-channel, be it your branch-based networks where the digital journey is being taken care of, or self-service channels or the assisted channels. Everywhere we need to focus on what are the data points that we are capturing. In case the photograph of the customer is expected, rather than asking to immediately pose for a photograph during the journey in an assisted model, do we share the link to the customer where they upload their photograph, and we sitting there and validating in the assisted model are going to be the key. And if it is an entirely digitized journey, how do we ensure the liveliness check is taken care, and at the same time the data of whatever we are capturing during the journey is utilized to process the particular customer requirement, and post processing how are we reacting towards the data that has already been captured is going to be crucial. And identifying the data processors across the organization, be it your technological support partners, be it your technology teams which are sitting, any outsourced team which is operating out from outside the premises of the financial institution, wherever the data sharing is going to is continuously moving across, right? In most of the financial institutions, or while we consider most of the institutions to be digitally savvy, we see half the time the data keeps moving across in an Excel file, right? The front end is the first aspect which is released, but the back end we keep still working on. So ensuring that whatever data that is lying in silos across this improvement of the backend are also taken care of in terms of identifying this data processing, data privacy requirements is going to be crucial. And then identifying your applications where the data storage is available across multiple databases, right? So we see, while each and every application has its own database, having the unified data platform where each and every data point is managed at this unified layer and being consumed across the applications as and when is needed, and is being refreshed as per the DPDPA compliance expectations that are set for the organizations are going to be crucial. And ensuring to have this consent mechanism mapped with each of the data collaterals and each of the data processor and the technological application that is utilizing this particular data are going to be the key. And once this particular activity is completed and we understand what are the data processes, what are the data points that are available in the institution, then we move on to the data impact assessment. This particular assessment framework shall have the entire data collection processes across the applications, be it your physical collection and then digitization form, or any particular channel journey, any integration with your fintech platform, are going to be scrutinized under this. Understanding the entire data collection process, having an audit mechanism set in terms to continuously monitor this data collection, and having the control assessment. Let's say if at all we found a particular data breach or anything that is not following the compliance expectations set by the organization of the in terms of the DPDPA, how quickly do we respond to these particular requirements, and how quickly do we ensure we are resetting the requirements as per the compliance expectations is going to be crucial. And ensuring that we have this data security aspects taken care of, be it your masking, encryption activities, ensuring the vaulting of the crucial data that is available, having this video KYC data stored in the right place, where because most of the institutions are now AI, AI front and AI first model that most of the organizations are following, where each of the data point that are being collected from the customer, be it your facial data, be it your voice data, be it your data points that you're validating towards this particular conversation, everything has a particular requirement where the requirements where the data is to be masked, maintained in a really private place. So that is going to be crucial again. Ensuring that the access to this data privacy, and ensuring that we take the previous data security requirements and impact that is identified throughout the life cycle of this particular data that is available from the customer is going to be again crucial. So it is not that means that rather than saying from today my DPDPA implementation has been begun, so I will ensure whatever guidelines I'm setting from today will only be applicable for the data that I'm collecting or the consent of the customer that I'm collecting right from today. But no, most of the the act very clearly states that it applies to all the historical data that is available in the organization, which is digitized and maintained. So it has to be checked up across all the historical data that is available from the in the organization. And post that in phase 3, where the organizations need to build the consent architecture mechanism, which needs to be validated across each and every data pool that is required across the systems, and developing this governance mechanism. Developing this governance mechanism is going to be one activity, and implementation of this governance mechanism is going to be one bigger activity. Like most of the institutions went through the digital transformation, there is a good possibility basis this consent requirements and the data requirements that are to be specifically enforced post the DPDP implementation. Most of the institutions could be going through this data transformation activity. So that is what we envisage most of the institutions going through. And then defining these security controls across the organizations, not just into the departments as we've been speaking of, but across all the partnerships, across all the partners, be it any outsourced model, be it any fintech activity that is happening, and enforcing this particular governance rules that we have built for the organization across all these channels is going to be again one crucial activity. And then in terms of the implementation, rolling out this consent framework, embedding this consent framework into all particular journeys, and then maintaining the purpose of this particular information that we are capturing, and ensuring the data timelines are well defined to ensure the data life cycle is being taken care of across all systems is going to be crucial. And then, as we've been speaking of, ongoing data audits is something most of the organizations will have to keep picking, ensuring that the clean data audit is going to be the crucial requirement, which most of the institutions not only have to report to the regulator, but also maybe the data protection board, which is going to be set up at the national level. And the undertaking this training and awareness requirements across the institutions is something that becomes a crucial activity for the bottom-up approach for the implementation activity. So this is all something that we are definitely focusing and helping most of the ecosystem partners with. And in case you are looking for any form of implementation support, please feel free to reach out to us. While we further move into the implementation aspects on defining what is the role of senior management, again, as we've discussed, let's go from the bottom-up approach. Yes,
as
sir.
we're running short of the time, maybe you can just close on as quickly as possible. Just
Sure,
continue
sure,
the order, and
sure.
we have a few questions also that we need to respond.
Definitely. So, as we've been discussing, it becomes the responsibility of everyone while trying to identify and see the data privacy requirements across the products is going to be the crucial activity. And once the product teams and along with the cross-functional team that is established identifies these particular requirements, they have to be discussed with the chief digital officer to implement privacy by design culture and ensuring to capture the consent in the life cycle of the customer onboarding, and ensuring the data processing is only done for the approved purposes, and prompt deletion of the data after utilization is going to be the key. And once this digitization aspects have been also identified by the CDO, we need to take the buy-in of the CTOs to ensure whatever design we are doing or whatever infrastructure we are building for to meet this consent requirements and privacy requirements are scalable and implementable across the platforms, be it the third party, be it the outsourced platforms that we've been discussing. And once these are all discussed and ensured to be put in place, it moves to the requisite of the CEO to ensure the implementation of DPO is done, ensuring that the data governance council is constantly monitoring the requirements and ensuring the centralized data privacy initiatives are taken care and implemented. And where unified compliance framework and upgrading of your GRC framework are going to be it is a requirement now to align it with their strategic compliance activity that needs to be picked up in the institution. So quickly moving across, in case you would like to check if your organization is DPDPA ready, these are some of the questions that you might want to check in. Is a DPO appointed in the institution where a nodal team is already also focusing on DPDPA readiness, trying to identify what is the consent requirements that are being captured? Are the data privacy implementations already in place, or the data security requirements already in place? Have we mapped all the particular customer journeys, trying to validate this data classification aspect, as well as the data dictionary is being fully updated as per the current requirements? Have we identified all the data processes and the third parties that are working in are fully helping the organization be fully functional? And are we reviewing existing consent management flow to be aligned with the DPDPA requirements are going to be some, again, crucial activities. And scheduling internal audits, trying to understand the data security and retention aspects that are currently operational in the organization, and trying to create awareness across the internal stakeholders and internal teams is something, again, going to be crucial. So that kind of brings us to the end of this session for this particular presentation. But let's see if at all we have any questions that are shared across.
Yeah, Deepak, there are a few. Let's, for example, I think we have lots more, but we'll try to address few. Is this also for IT vendors supporting BFSI client? Absolutely, because IT vendors will be critical data processor who will be working with the banks. But yeah, only you need to qualify that whether that IT vendor is handling or has any access to the customer personal information, either in terms of collecting or in terms of the processing. That's need to be classified. Like, for example, any guys who is into the printer support services may not be, right? But anybody who is an LOS provider or the ATM switch provider may qualify as that. It will come under the purview. Madhu is asking, do we have a system for individual to access, correct, or erase their data? Is there a process in place to respond to data transfer requests within that? I think that's a pretty interesting topic. So that's where that we may have the bank or individuals may have primarily either on a website or the mobile app, some mechanism to log a complaint, but not a very specifically mapped to this requirement that whether he can access the data or the correct or put up a request for the erasure. No. So I think this will be one of the tasks where that institutions may have to put up on a portal or put up some kind of a framework where they can go into the system and access. And is there process in place to respond to data? That's definitely need to be set down. There is no timelines, only with respect to timelines in terms of the breaches has been communicated, but definitely that multiple rights have been provided to data principal that in case if he is not getting a request, he can go to the data protection officer. Still, he is not getting a response from the data protection officer, he can go back to the data protection board also. So bank or any institution will need to have put up a process in frame that where that they can put on a respond to the data principal's request for the any be it on the data access, erasure, correction of the data. Mukund is asking, is the act applicable on data collected before the act comes into effect? This is a really gets tough. So primarily the DPDPA also emphasize on the data which has been collected earlier also. So there in that case, like say for example, many of the places you may not have collected the consent or you may not have sent the notifications. You need to figure it out the way to establish the consent, and the notification. You may have to send the notification. But we'll wait for the final rule for the implementation to come. But as of now, that act is very clearly onto the data which is getting collected after the act coming into effect, as well as the data which has been collected before the act. I'm not sure. Paramdeep asking very interesting. Is there a right to be forgotten like in the UK? Not sure if this was covered in hence asking. Deepak, any idea that you have?
The right to be forgotten, like across the platforms, is something that currently DPDPA does not support as per the requirements that are there. So, until or unless explicitly stated through the consent lifecycle or being requested by the customer to delete, the data is still going to be there in the system as per the regulatory requirement.
Yeah. Another question, will fiduciary obligation extend to TSP even if the TSPs are not accessing nor collecting any customer data? So again, may not be the 100%. Definitely, it will not get extended to TSP. It will depend on the nature of the partnership or the engagement that is there with the TSP. Like say, for example, it may not be anything related to the notices or to know the consent or the purpose, but it may definitely be related to the protection of the data, having the right security safeguard, which is their data, because the TSP is storing that data, may not be accessing or the collecting the data, but they are having the data is maintained, and especially in the cloud. But if the TSP is operating completely on the with the setup which is on premises, and TSP is only providing the backend support for any kind of the troubleshooting, then in that case it may not be applicable to the TSP. The obligation may not be extended to the TSP. So many of the questions are in itself a point for the discussions, for the longer discussions, but I think I'm just responding on that as we have the limited time. Are there tools and software for organization to fast-track data lineage, dictionary, catalog, and consent management? I think, Shikopal, there are multiple tools are available which primarily helps into the put up the data governance structures, put kind of the data discovery, and create a data dictionary kind of structure or the catalog. Consent management, I don't think, other than the account aggregator, which is already identified as a consent manager, is there, right? Which only caters to the one set of the data, but you don't have a proper consent management tools or the platforms. And at this stage also, we'll have to wait for any consent manager to come and get registered with the data protection board for the banks to engage with that kind of the tools provider, right? Now there are many players coming and building the platform as a consent manager, but may not be at this stage. It will be easy for you to go and align, because that consent manager has to get registered by the DPP data protection board. So yes, in bits and parts, you will have the tools, but not in the comprehensive. So I think we have come to the end of the sessions. This is that primarily one of the first session as a part of the code that we are planning, and be tuned to our LinkedIn page. We'll continue to have a lot more sessions where that will get deeper into the consent management, entire the security, the data governance aspect, the implementation aspects we'll touch upon. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and I hope you have given the feedback because your feedback always motivates us and keep on improving. So good night and have a good sleep, and thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining.